Here is a statistic that I want you to sit with for a moment because it reframes a great deal of what most men believe they understand about female pleasure and about what constitutes good sex. Fewer than 1 in 5 women can reliably orgasm from penetrative intercourse alone, less than 20%. That means that in the vast majority of intimate encounters that are structured in the way that most Western couples have been taught to structure them, from foreplay to penetration to the man's orgasm, the woman is not having the experience her body is anatomically designed to have, and she may have been accommodating that gap for years, decades, without either partner fully understanding why. This is not a statement about inadequacy. It is not a statement about desire or love or effort. It is a statement about anatomy, about the fact that the primary organ responsible for female orgasm is not primarily engaged by the form of sexual activity that most couples spend the most time on. And once you understand that clearly and clinically, the problem has a solution that is both specific and evidence-supported. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes, a men's sex therapist with over a decade of experience working with different couples and helping men regain their sexual health and strength back. In my clinical work with couples over 60, one of the most consistently impactful conversations I have is precisely this one: explaining the anatomical reality of female orgasm and the specific movement techniques that research has shown to be most effective at closing the gap between what penetrative intercourse as typically practiced provides and what a woman's body actually needs to reach orgasm consistently. For men over 60 in particular, this knowledge carries a specific practical value. The qualities that this approach to intimacy most rewards: patience, attentiveness, coordination with your partner, sustained without urgency, are qualities that you are more likely to possess at this stage of life than you were in younger years. Understanding the anatomy and the research does not ask you to do more. It asks you to do differently and in a way that is genuinely well-suited to who you are now. Before we go into the anatomy and the specific techniques, please subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications. Every Clears Throat Week, I publish content that gives men over 60 the clinically grounded, honestly presented, practically useful information about their intimate health that they deserve. Share this video with a man in your life who needs to hear it. Now, let us begin. The anatomy. Why most penetrative sex is working against female orgasm. To understand why the techniques I am going to describe work, you first need to understand the anatomy that makes them necessary. And this requires a correction to what most people, including most adults who have been sexually active for decades, believe about the clitoris. The clitoris, as it is commonly understood, is the small, externally visible structure at the top of the vulva, sitting beneath the clitoral hood. This is the glans of the clitoris, analogous to the glans of the penis, and it is extraordinarily sensitive. Its nerve density is higher than that of any other structure in the human body, estimated at approximately 8,000 nerve endings in a structure smaller than a fingertip. This density is why direct early stimulation of the glans is often overwhelming rather than pleasurable, and why the most skilled stimulation of this area begins gently and indirectly rather than with immediate firm contact. But the glans represents only the visible surface of a much larger structure. The clitoris extends internally in a configuration that was only fully mapped anatomically in the first decade of this century, which is a fact worth pausing on. The full anatomy of the primary female pleasure organ was not understood until remarkably recently, which explains a great deal about the inadequacy of sexual education that most people received. From the glans, the clitoris extends internally via the clitoral shaft, which runs upward beneath the pubic bone. At its upper end, this shaft divides into 2 crura, which are elongated arms extending backward and downward along the inner surface of the pelvic bones. Alongside these crura lie the vestibular bulbs, paired erectile structures that sit on either side of the vaginal canal. The entire internal structure wraps around a significant portion of the vaginal canal and extends several centimeters into the pelvis. Now, here is the anatomical problem at the heart of the orgasm gap. The clitoral glans, the only reliably orgasm-producing structure for the majority of women, sits above and external to the vaginal opening. When a couple engages in penetrative intercourse with the conventional in and out thrusting motion, the penis moves along the vaginal canal. The vaginal canal is internal. The clitoral glans is external and sits above it. The thrusting motion of conventional intercourse therefore produces very little direct stimulation of the primary pleasure structure in most women's bodies. It is not that penetration is without sensation. It provides internal pressure and stimulation that can be pleasurable, particularly as the vestibular bulbs engorge with arousal. But for the majority of women, it does not provide the specific sustained stimulation of the clitoral glands that is required for orgasm. A useful analogy that I share with the men I work with is this. Conventional thrusting stimulation relative to the female clitoris is roughly analogous to stimulating the area below a man's scrotum rather than the penis itself. Pleasurable, perhaps, but not targeted at the primary pleasure structure and therefore unlikely to produce orgasm in isolation. This is the anatomical context that explains the statistic I opened with, and it is the context that makes the movement techniques I am about to describe not just different approaches, but genuinely biomechanically superior approaches for producing female orgasm during partnered penetrative sex. Before I leave the anatomy entirely, I want to address one more dimension of this that is specifically relevant to couples over 60. The postmenopausal physiological changes that affect many women in this age group include changes in the speed and completeness of genital engorgement during arousal. The vestibular bulbs, which contribute to internal pressure and sensation during penetration, may engorge more slowly and less completely than they did in earlier years. The clitoral glands may also require more sustained and more specific stimulation to reach the level of sensitivity at which orgasm becomes readily accessible. What this means in practice is that the emphasis on direct, continuous clitoral engagement that the research supports is, if anything, more rather than less important for women over 60 than for younger women. The technique I am about to describe was designed for the anatomy. For older bodies, it is aligned with both the anatomy and the physiology of arousal as it functions in later life. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to mention something. If you are a man over 60 dealing with performance issues, loss of libido, erection challenges, or the frustration of feeling like you and your partner are no longer on the same page sexually, you may not notice when she is giving you the signals. That's why I put together a complete program specifically for men in your position. And I made a full video breaking it all down. This program covers everything from fixing erection and performance issues at the root to the specific techniques that make men champions in the bedroom after 60, to how to bring your partner to the same level of desire as you so that intimacy becomes something you both look forward to again. I'm talking about a complete hand-holding guide, someone walking you through every single piece from the beginning all the way to the end so that nothing is left unanswered. The link to that video is pinned in the comments section, and it's also in the video description below. Go watch it after this video. It will make everything I'm teaching you today work at a completely different level. Now, let's continue the research. What actually produces female orgasm during intercourse? When sexuality researchers, armed with a more complete understanding of clitoral anatomy, began asking precisely which body movements during intercourse were associated with higher female orgasm rates, the findings were consistent and specific. A large study involving more than 1,200 women used structural equation modeling, a sophisticated statistical technique for identifying which variables most strongly predict an outcome, to analyze the relationship between specific body movements during intercourse and female orgasm frequency. The finding was clear. Rhythmic rocking and swinging movements of the pelvis and trunk, coordinated between both partners during penetration, were positively and significantly associated with orgasm frequency. Critically, when researchers compared this rhythmic whole body rocking with isolated manual clitoral stimulation while the rest of the body remained still, the rocking motion produced higher orgasm rates. The movement itself, not just the direction of stimulation, was a meaningful independent factor. The mechanism this research points to is the sustained, continuous, rhythmic contact between the bodies that rocking creates. Specifically, the sustained contact between the base of the penis and the pubic region and the external clitoral complex. In and out thrusting repeatedly separates and re-engages the bodies, breaking the continuity of contact. Rhythmic rocking, while fully inserted, maintains continuous contact and continuous stimulation of the external clitoral structures with every movement, rather than only at the point of deepest insertion. A second large study, drawing on a nationally representative sample of 3,000 women in the United States, asked women specifically which techniques they used during intercourse to enhance their pleasure and orgasm. The results are worth quoting precisely. 76% of women reported using a technique the researchers called rocking, maintaining full insertion and using the base of the penis to maintain sustained contact with and stimulation of the clitoral area, rather than thrusting in and out. 88% reported using a technique called angling, adjusting the tilt of penetration to increase contact between the penetrating partner's pubic region and the woman's external clitoral complex. And approximately 70% reported using pairing, adding direct manual stimulation of the clitoris alongside penetration. These are not niche preferences. These are the techniques that the large majority of women have discovered, often independently and often silently, produce the clitoral engagement that allows them to orgasm. The fact that most of their partners are unaware that these adaptations are being made is itself a reflection of the communication gap around female pleasure that better education addresses. I want to dwell on that point for a moment because it is one that I find genuinely significant in my clinical work. Most women who have developed these adaptations did so quietly and without discussion because the cultural context around female pleasure and sexual communication does not make explicit discussion of this kind easy or natural. They have been adapting their body position, their angle, their movement, and sometimes providing their own manual stimulation in order to get the clitoral contact their orgasm requires. The man in the encounter has often been entirely unaware of these adaptations, and neither person has typically had the frank conversation that would bring both partners into explicit shared understanding of what is happening and what would work better. For couples over 60 who have been together for a long time, this can mean that years of intimate experience have been shaped by a quietly maintained set of adaptations that neither partner has ever explicitly named or understood. The value of today's video is not just the specific techniques. It is the shared understanding that creates the conditions for a genuinely different kind of intimate conversation. The coital alignment technique, what the specific research shows. The most specifically studied technique in this space is the coital alignment technique, abbreviated as CAT, developed by researcher Edward Eichel in the late 1980s and subsequently studied in multiple controlled trials. I want to describe it with enough precision that you can actually understand and apply it, and I want to give you the honest picture of what the research shows about its effectiveness. The coital alignment technique begins from a modified missionary position. The penetrating partner enters and then shifts their body upward by several inches, riding higher than the conventional missionary position. This shift achieves the key biomechanical goal. The base of the penis comes into sustained contact with the external clitoris and clitoral hood, rather than being positioned primarily at the vaginal entrance. In this position, the angle of penetration changes slightly, typically producing a different and often more effective internal pressure as well. Once in this position, both partners move together in a coordinated rocking motion, a pressure and counter-pressure rhythm in which both partners move together rather than one partner thrusting against a stationary other. The woman rocks her pelvis upward to meet the downward pressure of her partner, and he rocks downward to meet her upward movement, creating a rhythmic cycle of mutual pressure that maintains continuous clitoral contact throughout. Neither partner is moving dramatically or forcefully. The movement is relatively contained and coordinated, sustained by mutual rhythm, rather than individual exertion. In Edward Eichel's original study of 86 participants, women who learned and practiced this technique showed significantly higher rates of orgasm during intercourse, higher rates of simultaneous orgasm with their partner, and described their orgasms more frequently as complete and satisfying compared to the control group using conventional technique. Subsequent studies have shown a range of outcomes, with some finding similarly dramatic improvements and others showing more modest effects, with individual anatomical variation being consistently identified as a significant moderating factor. The distance between the clitoral glands and the vaginal opening, which varies meaningfully between women, affects how much direct clitoris stimulation a given position provides, and couples with greater anatomical variance may need to adjust more significantly to achieve effective clitoral contact. I want to note something about the simultaneous orgasm finding, specifically because it is one of the most practically meaningful outcomes of this research from a relational standpoint. The cultural narrative around sexual performance for men is heavily oriented toward lasting as long as possible, with the implicit goal being to provide enough stimulation over enough time that the woman reaches orgasm. What the coital alignment technique research suggests is that the issue is not primarily duration, but approach. That with a movement technique specifically designed around clitoral engagement, both partners can reach orgasm through the same movements rather than sequentially, which is an entirely different and, for most couples, more intimate and more satisfying experience. For men over 60, for whom the duration question carries its own specific anxieties, whether related to erectile reliability, stamina, or the lengthened refractory period of later life, the implication is liberating. If the path to her orgasm is not primarily about how long the encounter lasts, but about the quality and continuity of clitoral contact, then the encounter can be fulfilling for both partners regardless of its duration. The goal shifts from maintaining performance for as long as possible to creating the specific kind of movement and contact that her anatomy responds to, which is something entirely within reach regardless of how long the encounter lasts. This anatomical variability is why the underlying principle matters more than the specific technique. The principle is simple and consistent across all of the research. Sustained, continuous, rhythmic contact with the external clitoral complex during intercourse is the key factor. The coital alignment technique is one specific implementation of that principle. But the principle can be applied across multiple positions and configurations. 4 practical applications for couples over 60. I want to close with 4 specific and practical applications of everything I have described, addressed directly to the realities of intimate life for couples over 60, because the specific considerations of this age group matter for how these principles are most effectively applied. The first and most important application is communication before the bedroom. For couples who have been together for many years and who have settled into established intimate patterns, the introduction of a meaningfully different approach requires an explicit, relaxed, non-pressured conversation outside of any intimate context. The goal is to share what you have learned and to invite your partner's curiosity and collaboration. Something as simple as, I came across some research about body movement during sex that was genuinely surprising to me, and I would like to try something different together. That kind of open, curious, non-pressured invitation is far more effective than attempting to introduce a significant positional or movement change in the moment without prior discussion. Coordinated movement requires both partners to understand and intend the same thing. If one partner is rocking and the other is thrusting, the effect is diminished, and the difference in what each person is doing can create a sense of disconnection rather than enhanced intimacy. Mutual understanding of the goal and the technique before you begin is not a clinical nicety. It is a practical prerequisite for the technique to work well. One thing I want to say specifically about this conversation for couples over 60, many long-term couples have never had an explicit, detailed conversation about the mechanics of what they do together intimately and what produces the most pleasure for each of them. That conversation may feel unfamiliar or even slightly awkward the first time it happens, but in my clinical experience, the couples who have it almost universally describe it as one of the most intimacy-building conversations they have had in years, precisely because it creates a quality of shared curiosity and mutual investment in each other's pleasure that routine can erode over time. The conversation is itself part of the intimacy it is designed to improve. The second application is the woman on top adaptation, which is often the most practically accessible implementation for couples over 60. When the woman is on top and moves by grinding and rocking her pelvis forward rather than by moving up and down, she is in direct control of the contact between her clitoral complex and her partner's pubic region. She can angle and adjust in real time to maximize the stimulation that works for her specific anatomy. The principle is identical to the coital alignment technique: sustained clitoral contact through rocking rather than separation through thrusting. The woman on top position also reduces the physical demand on the male partner, which is a genuine practical consideration for men over 60 managing joint issues, lower back changes, or reduced stamina for physically demanding positions. And it gives her agency over the specific contact that produces her pleasure, which is itself a meaningful intimacy-building dimension. Her partner is not managing the technique on her behalf, but is actively present and responsive while she navigates what works best for her. The third application is pairing, the deliberate addition of direct manual clitoral stimulation alongside penetration and rocking. The survey data I described found that 70% of women use this combination independently, and the research consistently shows that the combination of penetration and direct clitoral stimulation produces higher orgasm rates and more intense orgasms than either approach alone. For couples where the anatomical positioning of the coital alignment technique or the woman on top adaptation does not produce adequate clitoral contact, pairing resolves this by providing that contact directly. Either partner can provide the manual stimulation, or a vibrator can be used for this purpose. The principle is simple: clitoral stimulation during penetration, rather than sequentially before or after it. I want to say something about vibrators specifically in the context of couples over 60, because there is sometimes a reluctance among men in this age group to incorporate them into partnered intimacy based on an implicit sense that using one represents some kind of inadequacy on their part. This interpretation is, clinically speaking, exactly backwards. A vibrator used during intercourse to provide direct clitoral stimulation is a tool for creating the very outcome that both partners want: her pleasure and her orgasm. It supplements what your body is providing rather than replacing it. And the research on couples who incorporate vibrators into their partnered intimacy consistently finds higher rates of sexual satisfaction for both partners, not just the woman. Being the partner who suggests this and who welcomes it without ego is itself a demonstration of the kind of emotionally secure, genuinely partner-focused presence that makes intimate connection with a man over 60 distinctly rewarding for many women. The fourth application is comfort optimization, which is something I address specifically with couples over 60, because physical comfort during intimacy is a genuine determinant of how long and how freely both partners can be present to the experience. Pillows and cushions used to support the lower back, adjust the angle of the pelvis, or support the knees can meaningfully change what positions are comfortable and sustainable. For the coital alignment technique in particular, a pillow placed under the lower back of the partner on the bottom can adjust the pelvic angle in a way that both improves clitoral contact and reduces lower back strain for both partners. For the woman on top position, a cushion under the knees of the bottom partner can provide support that makes the position more comfortable for extended periods. Taking a few minutes before beginning to arrange the physical environment for genuine comfort is not a distraction from intimacy. It is an investment in being able to be fully present within it for as long as both of you want to be. And it communicates something important to your partner, that her comfort and her full experience matter enough to you to attend to them. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes, a men's sex therapist with over a decade of experience working with different couples and helping men regain their sexual health and strength back. If today's video gave you something genuinely valuable and clinically useful, please do 3 things right now. Hit the like button because it helps more men over 60 find this content at exactly the moment they need it. Leave a comment below and tell me which of these 4 practical applications you are most interested in exploring with your partner, because I read every comment and your responses directly shape what I create for this community every week. And please subscribe with notifications on if you have not already, because every week I am here with the honest, evidence-based, deeply practical guidance on men's and couples' sexual health that you deserve. The gap between what is typical and what is possible in intimate life for couples over 60 is smaller than most people think. It does not require extraordinary athletic performance. It does not require perfect erectile reliability on every occasion. It requires understanding, communication, and the willingness to orient your approach around what her anatomy actually needs. Those are things entirely within your reach and within your relationship. There is one more thing I want to say before I close. For couples who have been together for many years and who have perhaps quietly accepted a level of intimate satisfaction that is lower than it could be, snorts. The knowledge I have shared today is an invitation, not a judgment. The research on what produces female orgasm has been available for decades, but has not been widely taught. The couples who do not have this information are not failing. They are simply operating without a map. You now have the map. What you do with it is entirely up to you and your partner to explore together. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes, a men's sex therapist with over a decade of experience working with different couples and helping men regain their sexual health and strength back.